Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Devil Running Talk Show. This is your host, Briston Rains. And today we have a super special guest on. It's Ed Shelton. He ran the Moab 240, and he's from Texas. I know that sounds crazy, but we'll get into that in a minute. I just want to go over a couple of things for these next few minutes. I want y'all to listen close. We have some sponsors. So our sponsors today are us. Hoka, any other running company out there, if y'all want to sponsor us, y'all totally can. Just send me an email at texasdoublerunning@gmail.com. But our sponsor today is ourselves. We have a coaching program. We have some races. We have apparel, content. It's a little bit of everything like that. And in our coaching program, one of our athletes, Lauren, shout out to Lauren. Whenever I got her, she was doing her half marathon time was about 8:45 pace. And in 3 months, I was able to work her down to about 7:30 pace for her to get a new marathon or half marathon PR. So if y'all want to have some results like that, everything is on our website. It's all linked below, texasdoublerunning.com. And another thing is we are the fastest growing Instagram account in the running industry right now. We grew to 700 followers in, I think, a month. And that was super amazing. We're getting about 40 to 50 followers a day. So I'm super stoked on that. But yeah, that's all for our little sponsorship segment. So Ed, how's everything going?
It's going well. Thanks.
So how are you? Do you still feel the 240 miles in your legs right now, or?
Not so much in my legs and my feet a little bit.
Okay.
I actually, I ended up with a pretty nasty infection in my foot. So it's actually been swollen for a couple of days. It's now kind of getting back to normal, but yep.
Man, that's wild. Tell us, so why, being from Texas, without there's not like a lot of unless you go to Guadalupe Peak, there's not any mountains. Why did you sign up for the Moab 240? Why are you insane enough to do something like that?
Sure. So this was my fourth 200 plus miler, and when I look at 200 milers, I actually look to say okay, let me travel go someplace I've never run before. So last year I actually did Bigfoot 200, which is by the same race company, had a fantastic experience. And so when I was looking at races this year, I was just like, well, I've never run in, Moab. So that one looks interesting. So yeah, so signed up for it. Probably I guess about a year ago. I forget when they opened up this signups, but signed up as soon as I could, got in, and yeah.
That's crazy, man. So, man, I bet you were stoked once you figured out, oh, I actually got in. I bet you were amazed by that. Tell us how the training was, because like I said, Texas, I don't know how you could train for a race like that, especially in Texas. I guess the heat helps, but tell us about training for the race and everything like that.
Yeah. So training this year has actually been really odd. So with COVID and the whole pandemic, a lot of the training I do is actually doing other races. But I haven't run a race since February. So usually by this time I would have done a couple 100 milers, a couple 100K. But without that happening, it was okay, how is my training going to change? And then also races just kept getting canceled. So for a long time, I wasn't even sure this race was happening. And so for me, for training, last year when I was doing Bigfoot, I was going and hitting the Hill of Life, which is in Austin, and just doing repeats on that for hours. Just do 16, 17, 20 miles, just 1 mile up, down. But with COVID, they closed the park. So for me, training was just so different this year from any other year that I've been training. So I was just doing neighborhood runs. So I would do about 40 to 50 mile running a week. But I also do a lot of other exercises, a lot of other training. So this year, again, with everybody being stuck inside, I actually increased my kind of just overall cross training. And just to give you an idea, because I was sharing this with actually one of the runners I was running with, when he was just you're only running 40, 50 miles a week. I'm yeah, but every day I'm doing every morning, and I've got the list here: 19 burpees, 15 pull-ups, 120 push-ups, 90 crunches, 90-second plank, 50 leg lifts with a hip lift, 90-second bridge. Then 4 days a week at night, I'm doing 15 more pull-ups, 120 push-ups, 90 crunches, 80 air squats, 50 leg lifts, 15 leg lifts with the hip lift, 90-second plank. And then I also weight train 3 to 4 days a week. Fridays, I do at least 25 minutes of rowing. And then, 3 runs a week that are between like 5K and 5 miles. And then Saturdays, like 19, 20-mile runs. Sundays, a 16-mile run. At
Wow.
all different types of times a day. So
That's absolutely insane. That's like, you must have really been listening to like some David Goggins videos on Instagram or something, because that's absolutely insane, man. I was actually talking to Greg, who was on the podcast, like I think last week or 2 weeks ago, and he talked about how training for his race, he didn't run a lot of miles either. He said he would do a lot of strength, and I hear that from a lot of people. They say, training for big races, they don't run 200 miles, 100 miles a week. They run like anywhere around 60, 70-ish, maybe even 50, and they just do a bunch of strength. So that's super interesting. That I can't believe you would do all that. That's a lot of working out. Tell us. So, okay, you did all this training and you were prepared. Tell us about the night before the race. How nervous were you?
So I would say going up to like the race and just kind of getting ready for it, definitely nervous because I was like, I'm not running any hills. Like, although everything around me is flat, I'm only running roads because all the parks are closed. So I got there, and honestly, like once I got there at the race location, get checked in because all sorts of different procedures this year. Drop off my drop bags, and like I was just like kind of at a nice like kind of state of calm. I think the one thing that actually really surprised me, and I would actually say affected my race and others as well, is they had a new electrolyte sponsor. So typically, you see like Trailwind or Gatorade at races. They actually had a new one, and this one contains dairy. And I'm vegan, so I'm like, I can't drink their electrolyte drink. And now I'm thinking like
Yeah.
I was actually kind of depending on being able to drink that at aid stations.
Hmm.
Like that night, a little nervous about that, but I've got a pretty good routine. So got back to my hotel room and, had dinner from a local place, taped up my feet to get prepared, got all my stuff laid out and packed. And then it was just like, all right, just lay down, go to sleep. Not too nervous the night before, but just thinking about all the planning. Once the drop bags are dropped off, I was just like, nothing I can do now. If I'm not carrying it, it's not coming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. The fact I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I knew I was gonna have to run for like 2 or 3 days straight. I wouldn't be able. How long did it take you, by the way? It took you like 3 days, right?
Yeah. So looking at it, approximately like 94 hours, 29 minutes.
Wow. Yeah. And I know people take naps in between and
Mhm.
everything, but still, like, you're running 240 miles for 2 to 3 days straight. And if I was trying to sleep at night, I would be so nervous thinking about that. That's absolutely insane. So tell us the story, start to finish, about the race and just, all the crazy things that happened within it.
Yeah. So this race, it was pretty wild. I'll definitely share some of the more wild stories as the sleep deprivation really took over. But like kicking it off, it was interesting again this year with COVID. Like they had different waves to start. So at race, they all started like 15 minutes apart. So I started at like 6:45 a.m., still dark out. Just kick it off going, like I started going at a pretty good pace. We're hitting the roads before we get to the trails. And really like that first section, it was so nice because I hadn't been on trails for so long, like real trails, that once I got off the road and hit those trails, I was like, this is awesome. Like, yes, this is why I signed up to do the race. I'm looking around, like, seeing the scenery. We're running on like terrain that's actually very similar to the terrain that I run on around here when I actually do get on the trails. So I'm feeling great, going at a good pace. hit that first aid station. Like, so now the aid station's definitely like different lengths in between, but this like first one was actually really quick. It was like 9 miles. Come into that aid station, then hit all the different like COVID rules. Like they're like, put masks on. You have to go over here. You can't touch these water bottles, and like all sorts of like stuff that they kind of told us beforehand. But like, now they're trying to get all these runners that muscle memory kicks in. You're just kind of doing your normal thing, and like, no, you can't do
Yeah.
that. You have to go over here and eat or drink and that kind of stuff. So yep, fill up my water, just nothing big because it was only like 9 miles, and looking at my pace and being like just in love with like how fast I'm going. Not going too fast, not too slow, just feeling great. Yeah, then kind of kick it, go to the next aid station, which is where we have our first drop bag. So in this one, we had 5 drop bags and then 1 sleep bag, which would move between our stations. Now, for me, I was running this race without a crew. So I was all alone. Other people had
Wow.
crews, no crews, no pacers. Like I just, showed up.
That's insane. Yeah,
uh,
I know a lot of people have like, especially for a 240-mile race. Like, I
yeah.
think it's rare that you see somebody without a crew. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
insane.
And this one with all the different like changes and restrictions, like crews were super, super helpful to the racers that had them. Just because like, yeah, like places you're allowed to go, not allowed to go, the sleep stations, they didn't guarantee like if you wanted to sleep, they're like, bring a tent and a sleeping bag because we won't have stuff for you, or
Wow.
sleep in your crew's car. So definitely like this year, folks that had a crew, I would say had an easier time. Not necessarily an advantage, but definitely a little easier. But yeah, hit that's next aid station. Realized like, okay, man, I really need to get some like the electrolytes because I can't drink the ones that they have. Turns out I didn't pack my tailwind in that first drop bag. My next drop bag's not till like mile 70.
Wow. Man, so
So
what'd you do? Did you just have to suck it up?
a little bit. So I did bring like a little tube of Noon, like the Noon tablets, which
Oh yeah.
they're good, but like for this type of endurance, like they just don't have enough calories and that kind of stuff in them. But they're still like they're better than nothing, right? So I
Yeah.
had those in my pack, so I grabbed one of those and yeah, head to the aid station. And this is actually where it starts getting like pretty like rough out there, because the sun just starts really coming out. It is super dry. Now, I mean, I took advantage of the heat here when it was running. Like I was running when it was like felt like 107 degrees. So I was like, I'm prepared for the heat.
Yeah.
So totally prepared for the heat, not prepared for the dryness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the benefit of Texas. Like it's so hot here, but it's so dry. I went and ran in the summer. I went and ran in New Mexico, and my lips got chapped immediately as soon as I got there because there's no humidity. It's all like super
Yeah.
dry there. So yeah, there was definitely a big difference, but at least it wasn't hot and humid because in my opinion, I think hot and humid is a little bit worse.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think for me, like I'm used to that. I just wasn't used to the dry, and then like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it like hurts to breathe because my mouth is totally dry. So I'm like sipping on water, sipping on
yeah.
water. Thing is it's like 17, 18 miles to the next aid station, and
Wow.
we're completely exposed. Um, Myself and a whole bunch of other people ran out of water. Like
Really?
we got like I ran out of water. I'm starting to feel like a little bit of cramping as well because I'm not getting enough electrolytes, and when it's that hot too, like this is on me. I'm not doing a good job eating either, just because it's hard for me to eat when it's that hot. So yeah, I'm like just losing nutrients. Like I could look down and see the salt on my shirt and my
Wow.
shorts.
Wow.
Um, I hit this
Did you start to freak out a little bit? Were you like, man, this might sacrifice my race? Did that like come to your mind at all?
A little bit. Like I've dealt with some of this stuff before, but like it's definitely in my mind. Like really paying close attention to my body. Yeah, I mean the only last year, and this is the only race I ever DNF'd. I was actually medically dropped because of rhabdo. So
Mm.
like I'm like paying attention, like, oh, how are my muscles feeling? Am I too dehydrated? Just really
Yeah.
keeping focus on that and saying like, okay, I need to slow down a little bit. Meaning like, yeah, I'll be out here longer, but like if I'm pushing my muscles too hard, I don't want to go down that route. Um, so yeah, so I make it to that next aid station. Go in and it's like a very sparse aid station. And I'm just like, I can't even figure out like where the aid station is. It's also set up a little different. And I end up going over to the medics and I'm like, they're like, everything good? I'm like, I'm totally dry on water. I need water. And they're like, okay, how you feeling? Dehydrated? They fill up my water bottle. They fill it up with hot water.
Wow.
I
So
don't know if that's,
did you
oh,
like
go ahead.
take a sip and then like spit it out, or like how did that work? How'd you
Oh man, I took a sip and I was like, it was just like so hot, but I was so dry and thirsty. I was like, I don't care. And I'm just like drinking down this hot water.
Man.
And they're like, oh, have you gotten any electrolytes, this kind of stuff? And I was like, not really. Like, I can't drink the stuff you guys have. And they're like, okay, well, go grab some watermelon with salt. So I was like, okay, cool. So I went into the aid station, got a couple slices of watermelon, just covered it in salt. Like you could see it on top. And just like scarf that down, scarf some more watermelon down. Yeah, kind of take a break, refill everything. And I'm like, okay, you know what? That wasn't too bad. The next, there's a water drop in like 7 miles. You know, just make it there, fill it up, and then there's like another 13 miles to the next aid station. So yeah, so get off on my way, doing well. Like I stop at the water station, refill like all the different bottles, everything, make sure it's all capped off, and start on the next section. And yeah, the next section, it ends up getting dark when I'm out there. It's you know, the next aid stations at 57 miles. So yeah, going out there, I actually end up running with like just kind of come across these two guys that are kind of, you know, walking, running, and I'm like, this guy seems like super familiar. It was, oh my gosh, I'm trying to look up his name. He was, anyway, he's won Moab before, and the guy
Oh,
that was
really?
running with him, I'm sorry.
Oh, so he won Moab before, and you
Yeah,
just happened to
yeah,
stumble across
Sean.
him?
Yeah, Sean Nakamura.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's insane. Was he like dehydrated? Was he like hurting or something, or was he
Uh,
just?
no, he was just kind of taking it easy. He was just like,
Oh,
his race year had just been so screwed up that he was just like, you know, he just wanted to take this one easier. And it was really funny. The other guy that was there was just total like fanboy on him, just asking him all questions. I was like kind of going with him for like probably like 2 hours. And yeah, he just kept asking like Sean, like, oh, tell me this story. Tell me this story.
oh my
It was fun
gosh!
to run with them. Uh, but yeah, it started getting dark. My legs started seizing up. My muscles are cramping. Running out of water. Make it to this next aid station, and I swear this next aid station is like it. The medics are doing triage. People are coming in like completely cramped up.
Wow.
One guy coming in like throwing up. It was just like I sat there for a little while to like get some food and some other things, and yeah, the people coming in, like one woman came in with vertigo, and they're like, and they're talking to her, is like, oh, it's probably because the dust got so packed into your ear that it's like throwing your balance off. And yeah,
It sounds
it
like it was a
was,
war zone.
it really was like people are like
Wow.
on cots. You know, some medics like, go check this person. They've been like laying there too long. They're like taking people's like pulses, like all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was pretty rough. From what I understand, like I think 25% of the folks dropped like that first day.
Really? That's
Yeah.
insane. I was watching like all the counters from start to finish. I would like check on it every couple hours every day. And yeah, I saw quite a few people, drop out like some flies, and I was like, man, that's absolutely insane. So I saw you
Yeah.
on there. There's you and another guy that were Texas runners, and I
Mhm.
was really hoping one of y'all would make it because I really wanted to talk to a Texas runner about the Moab.
Yeah.
So yeah, continue with your story though.
Oh yeah.
This is insane.
No worries. So yeah, so this next section's dark. The next aid station, it's 7 miles to a water drop and then 7 more miles. now that the sun's down, the temperature's dropped. I had a whole, like 2 bowls of like rice that they cooked for me that was just like, again, covered in salt, because my shirt at this point, it actually had gotten hard. Like the salt had like, it was dry, it was hard, it was all crunchy. I was like, man, I'm just losing all the different nutrients. So yeah, the next section, pretty, just once it cooled down, I was getting the water and I had that food. I felt great. Get to that aid station. It's kind of a mess because of just like there's so much crew there, because this is the first sleep station, that just trying to navigate to where the actual aid station was a little challenging, not too rough. But I get there. This is like 72 miles in. And at this point, because I've slowed down so much, like I wanted to make it further than this point before I went to sleep. And now it's probably like 2 in the morning. I'm like way behind where I want to be, for the first day, that is. So I'm like, well, all right, let me get my sleep bag. And I'm like, they go like, oh, you need a sleep bag? I'm like, yep. Tell them my number, tell them what it looks like. They bring it over and they're like, hey, do you want you want a cot? I was like, you guys have cots? I thought I had to set up a tent. They're like, no, we have some cots that are just like outside, or we might have some cots in a tent. I was like, whatever, I'll take a cot outside if no one's using it. And they're like, well, we don't have blankets or anything like that. I was like, that's great. I got my sleeping bag. So yeah, get over the cot. Change my shirt. Temperature's dropping now, quite a bit. Take off, socks, shoes, clean my feet. My feet are looking good. I feel really good about how my feet are doing. I'm just like kind of bummed at like where I am in terms of the time. But I'm like, it's an ultra, things happen. I'm still in it. So yeah, I get into the sleeping bag, and it's pretty funny because like it's the total like mummy sleeping bag. So I like pull it closed. It's just like out there in the open, and inside like make a little like I've got my phone and my charger and the alarm set there, my glasses, my headlamp, all just like inside my sleeping like bag. So I know where it is. Sleep for an hour and a half. That's I set the alarm for an hour and a half. Sleep for about an hour and 15. Get up. Get my shoes on, check my feet, tape anything that needs, then go get some food, and I'm out. I probably was at that aid station, I think about 4 hours total, with eating and everything else. But I'm out by like 6:45, or 6:30. So a little fat. So basically less than 24 hours, and I'm kind of on my second day. Next day is going well. My muscles are sore from the day before, and typically I don't run with poles, but because I had put so much strain on my muscles in that dehydrated state, I wanted to give them some relief. So I grabbed my poles, which were in my sleeping bag. So I have my poles with me. Like I said, I don't really like running with them, but I know like they're going to relieve my legs a little bit. So going well. Hit that first aid station, everything's going well. Again, just kind of bummed a little bit about my time. But I've got a nice rhythm. I now have like tailwind because I was able to pick it up from my sleep bag and now my drop bags. And yeah, the day is going pretty well. And then just kind of like skipping ahead, we hit to it's starting to get dark now. Like really, it's a pretty uneventful day. Just kind of me mainly by myself. Now and then hitting some runners, but we're all kind of at our own pace at this point. Hit that second to last aid station before. Well, I should say the next sleep station is at mile 120, and I figure, looking at the sleep station after that, like I'm going to sleep there. Just given the pace I'm going, I'll hit that one, sleep there, and then just get up like way early, like only sleep an hour and then get going. But yeah, as I'm going to this, after that second to last aid station, it is now the actual different elevation climb. So other than this, it's been kind of either flat or like a slow incline. Now we've got like big drops and like steep climbs. So, and these climbs are like technical single track, go up and then down and up and down. And now you're always going up, but you're just like, it feels like, okay, I just went all this way up and now I'm coming back down to go back up. And I'm not the best climber. So, I'm going up pretty slow. This one dude comes out of nowhere, just flying by me. And he's just like, I'm coming through. He's like, I don't know how I'm doing this, but I'm doing it. I'm like, so
What?
I'm just going to keep doing it. I was like, right on, brother, keep going.
What? That's insane.
Yeah, he
That's
was like,
crazy.
it was great because he totally didn't understand why he was going so fast or how. And he was just like, I'm just going to live it, man. I was like, go for it. Um, yeah, then we do that, and then we end up on a gravel road and what feels like a forever climb. So we just ran down the road going pretty fast, get to like the bottom, and now we have to go back up. And at this point, like I'm looking at the time going, oh man, I didn't account for like how much this incline would slow me down. So like I'm picking up the pace, running up this hill, like I'm actually running, get to the Shea Mountain sleep station, and go in there. Medics kind of talking to me, checking me out. They're checking everybody out, resetting spot trackers, and they're a little understaffed. So I'm like, man, I look at them. I'm like, okay, do you have a place I can sleep? They do. They have another cot. So I go lay down for about an hour and 15 minutes, and it's same kind of thing. Bundle up inside my mummy bag with like all my stuff inside. And this is where the first hints of like the sleep deprivation start coming in, because next I lay down, next thing I know, like my alarm goes off. My alarm goes off and my mind's just like somewhere else. I'm like, okay, what's going on? My alarm. Okay, turn off my alarm. And I'm like, wait, what's this on my phone? What? Why is Kelsey Grammer's publicist texting me? Wasn't texting me. Like, what the hell? Like, no, wait, I don't have time for this. Why are they texting me? How are they even texting me? My phone's in airplane mode. It shouldn't even work. Oh, but Kelsey Grammer, he's got a lot of money. He probably knows a way to get
Wait,
through to
so
me.
was this like a dream or a hallucination or something? Or
It was not reality, but I was like awake because I'm like rolling around inside my sleeping bag, like grabbing my phone. I'm like, okay, no, I'm not going to answer it because I don't have time to answer it right now. Like,
that's wild. That's absolutely wild. It's crazy, like what the mind does at sleep deprivation and everything like that. I'm excited to hear like what else happens because I know there's a lot more.
yeah, so like it's so funny. So all this is happening like while like I said, while I'm rolling around inside my tent, and I'm like convinced like somehow my phone is connected to his phone, which is why they're texting me, because like my alarm is going off in the middle of the night for him, and they're like trying to get in touch with me to like find out what's going on. And I'm just like, I at some point I'm like, I don't have time for this. And my second alarm goes off, just like my backup one in case I oversleep. I turn that one off and like get out of the sleeping bag and start like just focusing on getting back out to run. Um, and it wasn't until like kind of like later when I'm actually like running, like that like sinks in. I'm like, oh my God, that scene was entirely insane.
Yeah, that's wild. That's absolutely wild, man. So what mile were you at this point? You were 120?
120. Yeah. So
120?
120, about 2 hours, 2.5, maybe hours of sleep at most. But yeah, I get out of here, get out of the tent and like gonna get some food. I got some pretty bad blisters on that last part because there was some like just the terrain, like I ended up smashing my feet a bunch of different times. So like I knew I could feel it, and I did see it when I was cleaning my feet. Like my one toe, like was pretty much like there's the toe and it's like covered in a blister, like all the way around my
Wow.
pinky toe, and it's like purple, it's like filled with blood and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so I could take care of it, but they do have medics that are really good with feet at any of the destination trails, and they have like the Luco tape. They have all the different stuff. So I was like, well, if the medic's available, I'll have them take a look. So she was available. She took a look, and she was just like, she's like, your feet look great. You got a couple hot spots, but this toe, man, this toe looks bad. And I'm like, yep. I'm like, uh, she's like trying to talk through the different things. I'm like, let's just drain it and tape it, because like this thing is gonna just, if this thing bursts on its own, it's gonna be like way worse. So yeah, we drain it, we tape it, we tape a couple other spots. We leave like a little area to like allow us to drain it again later, exposed like in the tape. But yeah, get my shoes on, get some more food. Well, I'm trying to figure out like what to do about food and get the salt. They don't have salt at this aid station, or at least they didn't know where it was. So the one guy gets me a tortilla with like guacamole on it, and I'm like, "Do you have salt?" He's like, "No." Runner next to me, he's like, "Well, I got a salt pill." He's like, "You just want that?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know necessarily want to take a salt pill. Like, yeah, I don't know which kind of pill this, like salt pill and that kind of stuff." He's like, "No, just open it up and like sprinkle it onto your guacamole." I'm like, looking at him like, "Really?" It's like, yeah, just do it. So, all right. So yeah, I take this like salt pill, open it up, sprinkle it on the guacamole, fold up my tortilla and eat it. And it's so funny because like a couple days later, I'm like writing up my race report. I'm like, nowhere else would you be like where you go up someplace, a stranger hands you a pill, and you're like, "Okay, yeah, I'll take this, and let me open it up and sprinkle it onto my taco."
Yeah, there's no telling what that actually could have been, but
Yeah, and I was like, it tasted fine. I was like, but yeah, so I get on my way. Next section's road section. It's pretty early in the morning. I think it's like 3 or 4, but I'm feeling good. So I'm going, making a really good pace, because now I'm like sleep, food, all these different things. Then it gets right around dawn, and I'm doing a little bit of like sleepwalking where I'm like looking and going, "Wait, how did I just where like kind of this terrain looks different than the one I remember." So it's about an hour of that, but once I get through that, I'm going well. Um, and I'm looking at my pace and my time, and I'm like, okay, my goal is to get to the next station is at 167, is road 46, which is the sleep station right before the big climb to like LaSalle, which is the highest peak in the race. So I'm like, my goal to get there before it's dark, and then take an extended break, and then try to do the mountain at night. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye on my pace, going well. I did forget to say one thing on Shea Mountain, actually, now that I remember. Sorry, if I'm a little over place. It's a lot to remember.
hey, you're right.
But while I was there and while I went to the medic, I put my gear down on a chair, and I put my poles down. And there was a guy that was like close to me that had very similar poles. And I was looking at him going like, okay, well, let me not put it next to his. Let me put him over here in like a different angle so I know which ones are mine. When I got back to my seat, my poles are gone. His poles are there. I'm like, damn it, he took my poles.
So,
And I grabbed his. Oh, go ahead.
so you ended up using some other guy's poles?
Yeah. So his poles were the same like make and model, but they were like my poles hardly ever used. His like super worn down, like they're like the straps are all like frayed, and they feel shorter and they feel a little lighter. So I'm thinking like these might actually be shorter than my usual poles. But I'm like, well, I'm taking them because like I've got no other choice, and maybe I'll find this dude like at the end of the race and get my poles back, right? Um, so yeah, so I'm going through like using these poles like in the morning, but because they're different, they're actually giving me blisters on my hands. Like I'm not
Hmm.
used to them. So I get those taped up at that first aid station. I just go in. I'm like, just can you tape my hands up? I'm like, got someone else's poles, and I'm asking everybody there, like, hey, are those your poles? Sure, you didn't like change them at Shea? Like, nah, these are mine. Some people are like really defensive about it. I was like, dude, like, don't worry, I'm just trying to find my poles. But yeah, then the next 2 sections is basically like a half marathon, pretty flat, exposed in the sun, to the next aid station. So do that one, feeling good. At that aid station, I'm beginning to feel like a little bit of chafing. So I'm like, okay, let me take a little bit longer of a break, take care of the chafing, get some food before the next like 13 miles. And while I'm there chilling, this other guy comes in who's definitely feeling some dehydration, definitely like having a rough time. He may have actually gotten there before I did. I forget, but he was like laying down with the medics, and get the medics to check my feet again. And that toe is not looking good. It like refilled. He can't really figure out a good way to drain it, and keep it clean and all this other stuff. I'm just like, just poke a hole, man. Just go for it. I don't care. And just tape back up. And so I'm doing that. I'm like keeping an eye on this guy that's like having some dehydration issues, but he's actually recovering pretty well. we get up, like he's getting up to go, and I'm like, hey, dude, like, if you wait a minute, I'll go out with you. That way you have somebody else, right? Like, because I could tell he's still a little out of it. And, you know, at these races, like, you know, we try to take care of each other, like, because he's going right back out there in the sun, the flat ground. So he's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, don't worry about it. He's like, oh, I might slow you down. I was like, it's an ultra, like, you slow me down by 5 minutes, it's not going to make a difference. And I'm like, oh, I probably already missed my time, like what I want to do in time. So we head out, we start talking. Right when we leave the aid station, I kind of asked him, like, okay, yeah, make sure you got everything. And he's like, yeah. And he checks, totally forgot to fill his bladder with water.
Man.
And I'm like, we're going back. You're filling your bladder. And he's like, oh, no, you don't have to wait. I'm like, no, I'll take you. I'm like, this is why someone should go out with you.
Yeah.
Check these things. So we go back in. He's filling up his water. This other guy comes in, sits down, and I'm looking at him going, like, those look like my poles. I'm like, I see his name. I'm like, hey, Jared. It's like, and he doesn't. I'm like, hey, Jared. I'm like, what? I'm like, those your poles? And he's kind of a little out of it. He like picks on my looks at it. Like, yeah, I think so. I'm like, I don't think so, man. I think you got my poles. I think I have yours. And he looked. He's like, oh, he's like, these seem brand new. Mine totally aren't brand new. And they seemed a little taller. He was like, I just thought I was really sleep deprived and I wasn't questioning you too much. But no, man, these are your poles and those are mine.
Hey, you got your poles back.
Yeah, so I totally got my poles back before the big climb. I was like, so like when Alex, who's got was dealing with some dehydration, he was leaving, he was all apologizing. I was like, dude, if we didn't go back, I would have never got my poles. So it's like it all works out, you know. Just so yeah, I go with him for a little while. We're chatting. He had never done anything longer than a 50K before this.
Wow.
So yeah, so I was giving him some tips and tricks. We were probably together for about 2 miles before like I'm beginning to pick up the pace, and he's doing great. So I'm like, you cool if I go ahead? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm doing really well right now. So yeah, so I pick up the pace, make it to the next aid station really right at the time I was planning to it. So like I hit that like right as the sun's setting. So it's still light, it's kind of twilight, and I'm like, perfect. This is, I'm right where I want to be. You know, kind of readjusting for the time. Get a bunch of food, get my feet checked out again, and now like this medic is like looking at my toe and just being like, "Oh man," she's like taking a scalpel and like trying to like cut it open and like drain it. I'm like, "Yeah, just do what you need to do. Like just get me back out there on my feet. Like I'll deal with this later." But yeah, every time it's like looking worse. So I get wrapped up. Actually, I see Alex like come into like the aid station. He's doing well. So he's like probably like an hour or so behind me. So not too, and he's doing great. He's getting his feet checked out. So yeah, then I go back out. I slam like a Red Bull, check out, which was like, do you have all your gear? So this race you had to carry a lot of gear because of how cold it gets at night. So like, do you have your pants? Do you have your emergency blanket? Do you have your hood? Do you have your long sleeve? Do you have your jacket? Do you have your hat, your gloves, your whistle? Like all the gear. So I go through the mandatory checklist with them, got everything, and I head out. Yeah, and the next section, like totally pitch black. So probably the best views of the entire time. I can't see a thing. I get to the highest point, can't see. I look around and it's just like black everywhere. I'm like, oh, well, you know, it happens. The views have been awesome so far. So yeah, hit the peak, come back down. Definitely my feet are hurting because of the way the train is, and I'm just banging them up like crazy because I'm definitely a little tired. And now is when I start hitting some issues of like my glasses are fogging up a little bit, having a little hard time seeing from that, and paying attention to the GPX track to help me keep on course, make it to that next aid station, but definitely like feeling like, okay, I am definitely low on sleep. Pushing myself pretty hard, but like this isn't a sleep station, it's a pretty small aid station. So, and the temperature is pretty cold. So like, as I'm just sitting there, I'm like shivering. So I'm like, I gotta just get back out there. So get some food, some more like, you know, water, everything out, start heading back out. And my glasses are, because it was so cold, I had like a thing covering my nose and mouth, and it's just fogging on my glasses. So I can't see the trails. I'm like, this sucks. Pull that down. So now like my face is cold, but at least I can see. And I'm having a hard time following the trails. but I'm doing all right. End up running into 2 runners, which made me feel great because I'm like, okay, I'm not off trail. Pass them, and they're staying pretty close behind me. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear them talking like, dude, do you see that? Talking to me or like his pacer? So I kind of like listen because he's talking to his pacer. He's like, those are eyes. You see those eyes? And they're like shining their headlights into the headlamps into the woods. And they're like, oh, that looks like a cat. Dude, that's a cougar. They come like running up to me and they're like, I think we all need to stay together. There's a cougar back there. And I'm
Was
like,
there
I turn around
actually
and
one, or?
I have no clue. I didn't see one. I didn't see like exactly where they were, but like I was pretty far ahead of them when they were seeing that. So we're going, and like these 2 guys are, you know, rightfully so, pretty paranoid. Like there's a cougar out here, and they keep looking back, and they're like, it's stalking us, man. Like it's over there in the shadows. And I'm like, just keep moving forward, keep moving forward. So we're making lots of noise. We stayed together for a couple miles. They were convinced that this cougar was stalking us for like at least 2 miles. Finally, we feel like, okay, we've lost the cougar. So I take off running again. And this is definitely where I would say I start to lose more of a grip on reality than even previous, because I'm like getting off the trail. I'm looking at my GPX tracker and trying to stay on the trail, but like either I wander off the trail or something, and then I'm really having a hard time getting back on. And these 2 guys come up and they're like, I'm like, hey, because I think his name was Zach. I was like, Zach, where are you guys? And I'm like, are you on the trail? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, I lost the trail. I can't figure out how to get back on. So like I meet up with them, get back on the trail, feel good, keep going. And then I look in and go, okay, I'm coming up on this aid station really, really soon, but I can't find it. Like I should be able to see this aid station looking at my GPX tracker, but it's just dark woods and there's nothing there. Well, turns out that wasn't an aid station. I had accidentally somehow put a drop point on my map that looked just like an aid station, but doesn't exist. So I'm looking for an aid station that doesn't exist. The path to it doesn't actually connect, because it'll draw a path, doesn't connect to the path that I'm on. So like I'm convinced like I'm just on the wrong trail. So for the next like 2 to 3 hours, I'm like kind of going down trails, circling back, trying to find this aid station that doesn't exist. While doing this, my mind is trying to make logic out of like, why does this aid station not exist? And certain things come to mind. I am convinced that part of these woods are owned by Amazon. Don't know why. And that Amazon is actually like sponsoring this aid station. And I'm looking around, I'm like, I must be in the right place because there's all this old logging equipment, and Jeff Bezos loves logging equipment. So like I'm close. I know I'm close. And I'm like looking for it, and I'm like going to the point, and I'm trying to figure out like, oh, like this is like they have all these like smart people working for them. Like this is it. You have to like solve the puzzle of the trails in order to find the aid station. So now I'm like trying to solve the puzzle of the trails and be like, which one is more closer aligned to like tells the better story of their history, like this kind of stuff.
What? That's absolutely crazy, man. Like,
and well, it gets even better too. So like now I'm like finding, like getting to the point where I'm like using the GPX, like the sun's coming out, I'm like looking going, I should be like right on top of this thing. I'm like, that's it, it's underground. Because who would put an aid station underground? Of course it would be Amazon. The reason I can't find it is I'm looking for trails, not tunnels.
that's absolutely insane. Holy crap. That's so wild. That is absolutely wild.
Yeah, so now I'm like doing these circles looking for tunnels, and at that point I'm like, no, something's not right here. And I finally like I sit down, I find a rock, I sit down, and I open up the GPX, and I'm like really like scrolling in, and I'm like looking at it going like, hey, why does this point doesn't have a name? And I'm looking at like I've got a little cheat sheet with like the distance of, I don't know if you can see it, but like it's got all the
Oh yeah.
aid stations and the distances, and I'm like counting and trying to figure out, I'm like, wait, this seems like an extra point. I finally like scroll in and like zoom in far enough, and I'm like, oh, this isn't an aid station. This is just a point I accidentally dropped on my map. And I'm like, oh. So now I'm like, I know where to go. I start heading that way. I've lost like 2 to 3 hours just looking for this aid station that doesn't exist. And I can only account for about 2 of those hours. So I'm pretty sure one of them or some part of it, I just fell asleep out there. And now I'm heading to this aid station. I'm still a little out of it. Like somehow I'm still like, these woods are owned by Amazon. And I'm like, and I'm looking at the name of this next aid station, or like where it's called Wind Whistle, but like for some reason I'm like, oh, that's like part of the Whistler resort and like mountain bike trail. So like, how are we in Canada now? This doesn't make sense. All right, I'm just gonna go, and my mind is like everywhere. Like I'm thinking like somehow I'm brokering a deal with them and Amazon for this trail so they can be connected. And like at this point I'm like, I finally snap kind of out of it and go like, okay, my mind is just out. I'm out of my mind. And I take a breath, I look around, I'm like, okay, cool, I just got to make it to this next aid station. I got to hurry up. I start running, boom, hit a rock, trip, hit my head, actually hit my head on a rock, get up, I can feel like the blood coming down. And I'm like, okay, well, now I really need to make it to the next aid station.
Yeah.
So the next part, get off the trails onto a road that is like just like super steep up. I'm just kind of like moving slowly, blood's dripping down my head. Like people driving by be like, you got it, man. And I'm just like, I just need to make it there. I'm like, thanks. Finally make it to that aid station. It turns out it's just a scratch, nothing bad. And get cleaned up, decide that, you know what, for this next section, I got lost for way too long in the woods. I hit my head. I ask if there's a pacer out there, like anyone that wants to pace me. Thankfully, there was a guy, his name Darrow, I should say. Darrow, he was like, yeah, I'll pace you. I was like, awesome. So yeah, he paced me for the next section, 20 miles. For the most part, it's downhill, doing well. But my mind is still a little off because I am convinced I've run this before. I'm like, I know what's coming up next. And like, I know what this is and I know what this is. And I'm like, he's like, oh, have you run it before? I was like, I must have, or I mountain biked or something. Yeah, I checked with my wife when I got home. She's like, you've never been to Moab. But I'm like, I'm convinced I was there. Like, and I knew the race and like where the next turn was. And yeah, so again, mine's doing some funny things. Get to that last aid station, Porcupine Rim. Not feeling good when I got in, but like, took care of like everything that was fine. Ate some more food, and last section, I'm like, okay, get my feet taped up one last time, because I'm like, I've only got 13 something miles or whatever it was, 17 miles. But my toe had been like basically draining so much liquid that the top of my shoe was wet. You could see the top of my shoe being wet from all the stuff coming out. So I take off my shoes, take off my socks, and like the medic's looking at like the tape, and he's like, honestly, he's like, the best thing to do is if we get this tape off. He's like, but I'm not doing it, because I'm like pulling the tape and you could see like the skin like tearing. Ooh. So like I'm doing it real slow, taking it off. I'm like, I think I can get it off. And I'm like slowly doing it, definitely tearing some skin, everything like that. I actually able to get the tape off. The other medic actually comes over, cleans everything up, and she's just like, not much I can do. I was like, just do what you can to keep me going. So she's like, well, probably best thing I could do is I could put some gauze in here and tape it up really, really well. So like it should just, like the gauze should just soak up everything that's coming out and should keep it relatively clean. She's like, but this is going to be a nightmare tomorrow. I was like, just do it. So she totally tapes it up. Like half my foot is covered in tape to keep this thing on. Then get on the trail. End up going the wrong way at first. I'm by myself. I'm trying to figure out exactly where the trail is. I don't trust my own ability to use the GPX now, since I know I was lost for 3 hours trying to follow it. hear some dude like yell out to me. He's like, "Hey, are you on the trail?" I was like, "I don't know. Are you?" Anyway, we find each other. Um, his name is also Alex. And yeah, ended up running with him for the last 17 miles. Um, it was a rough 17 miles. We were going at a pretty slow pace, probably doing like 2 miles an hour. Um, and yeah, it was super dry. I started to lose my eyesight, which happens every now and then. So like I can't see. Like I
Yeah.
actually get to the point where I couldn't see the trail, and it looked like he was just walking on air. And I'm like telling him like, "Tell me if I'm gonna walk off a cliff here, because we are next to a cliff." But yeah, we get through that, hit the road, pick up the pace. Now my eyes are doing a little bit better because it's not as dusty. The wind is actually making my like the cold and the moisture is just not as dry and stuff. My eyes are starting to water up a bit, which is helping me see. But yeah, then went in, did those like hit those 4 miles on the road. We did a really good pace, and then like that last half mile in, I just like basically Alex was just like, dude, he's like, if you want to go. He's like, I'm going to take my time coming in. And I think he was also like, he's like wanted a picture by himself kind of thing too. He's like, I don't want to be in the background of your picture. I was like, that's cool. So yeah, I sprinted in, came in, felt great, and was just like super happy I'm done. They're like, how are you doing? I was like, my feet, like all my toes feel like they're grapes that are about to burst. But yeah, other than that, I'm doing pretty well. Had a bandage on my head from where I hit, like I cut my head open. Yeah, and that was the end.
That's wow, what a story, man. Um, you literally went through everything. Hallucinations, someone stole your poles. Man, that was definitely a super wild story and one to remember. Would you say that's like one of your like most crazy races you've ever ran, or?
I mean, they're all a little bit different. This one had the looking for the aid station that didn't exist. I've had hallucinations before. I've never like had that kind of like just being really out of it like I was there. So yeah,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
that was wild. So and then yeah, then even as I snapped out of that and started going in, like I still knew like I wasn't fully like I didn't have a full grip on reality. So yeah, definitely like that section was one of the most wild ones. Like my wife's watching my tracker and I was like, did you see when I was doing like circles in the woods for like 2-3 hours? She's like, yeah, what was going on? I was like, I got a story to tell you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Man, that's absolutely wild. Was that your first time in Moab, Utah?
Yep.
It was? That's
Yep. Even
awesome,
though I
man.
was convinced I had been there before. Yep.
Yeah.
First time
It could
there.
have been deja vu. Who knows? Who
Yep.
knows? That's wild, man. That's definitely a really really cool and interesting story. Do you have? I think did you have like a website or something like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, so yeah, I keep a blog of all like kind of my running and endurance races. It's fox-runner.com. So if you search for Fox Runner, you'll find it. I haven't put up this race report yet. It'll probably go up in the next like week or so. But yeah, you can if anyone's interested, you can go see some of the other crazy races, crazy other things that I've done too. So.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, make sure all y'all go check out his website and make sure y'all read his report on the Moab 240. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. That's such a cool story. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna make sure to leave all his social media links, like his Instagram, website, everything like that, in the link below. So make sure you guys go check all of that out. Also, I would like to add before we end this talk show, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you'll be able to actually see this, but we do now have some hoodies coming out soon. So make sure you guys go check that out. They're gonna be, I think we're gonna have them November. So if y'all want to get some hoodies, Texas Devil Running Company hoodies, they're super unique designs. So we're gonna have hats and stuff like that too. So make sure all y'all go check that stuff out. But yeah, that was Ed Shelton, the Moab 240. We have episodes every Saturday, so make sure you guys tune in for next week. And that'll be all. So thanks for tuning in, guys.